Good morning. This will be update one of the Torsion Tools toolbar with a pull request and two issues that were submitted on GitHub. So trying to address those as well as talk through some additional functionality that we've included for folks to be able to grab. So um, last time we went through, we saw the four things that were here on the Sheets tab. And then I have now added a Tools tab with a couple of features. But based on a pull request on the GitHub, the capitalized name feature used to just step through every sheet in the model and capitalize it automatically. And the issue was raised that, well, what if there are sheets that you don't want to be capitalized, or if you happen to be working in maybe a firm or environment that doesn't do that for everything. So much like the find and replace feature where it gives you this preview, capitalized name feature will now show you only sheets that are not all caps already. So it'll skip those. So it also helps efficiency and speed of the process. But now you get to see this preview. If there's a sheet that you do not want to have updated, you can just remove it from the list just like you were able to before. And if you hit the capitalized, then it'll step through the rest of those. So you see here the floor plan, but the title sheet did not. So that was just something that somebody raised. I think it helps make it to where you can kind of see what's going to happen before you do it. That's always a good thing, especially when you're starting out. So the next couple of pieces I wanted to show, one was just some functionality that I extended to the toolbar. It's actually the warnings dialog. I know warnings can be a little bit of a touchy subject. How many are too many? Which ones are important? Which ones aren't? How do we just say, well, those don't really matter? Um, but there's also not a really easy way to kind of work through and see what they're doing and where they're at, usually very well. So this is a functionality I've developed over time. Um, but the warnings dialog box will pop up. It gives you a listing of all the warnings in the model. So that wouldn't be any different than if you go to the Manage tab and then go to warnings. It's the same number of warnings. It's just obviously in a little bit different format, but in theory, you kind of step down. It's a little bit vague um, on what it is. So the warnings piece here, it can give you a little bit more information. It gives you obviously the name. It can also give you some information about who created it, if it's a work shared model, what phase it was created in, and if it was demolished. And these three things I have found over time to be very effective, so that often I'll have warnings and it'll be an element that's actually been created and demoed in the model, but for some reason it's still causing conflicts maybe in a previous phase, and that's why it's in the warnings list. So just some additional information to kind of dive into it to see where those things land. Um, Very similar to the regular warnings dialog. When you select on an item, it will select all the elements associated with that warning. So there, in this case, there's the two walls overlapped. So it will actually select both walls. Here, where it's just there, it picks up a single item. There's also a filter, so you can filter down by the description. So if you just want to see highlighted walls, you can filter and it'll pull up just those. Um, Another thing that's nice is when you do have them filtered like that, if you come down here and do the isolate filtered, so this will isolate in whatever the active view is, it will isolate only the rows that are currently shown. So if you filtered it and go to isolate filtered, it shows only the walls that are part of these warnings here. So if I were to um, go back to none and hit isolate filtered, um, then you'll see now the stairs are also included in that. So it's just a way to kind of quickly be able to jump in to see why it's saying these are overlapping walls. You can kind of see where they're at there. The other nice thing about it is, let's say this stair element here, it's saying that it doesn't reach the extents. But if I go change this to a different stair type, then that warning goes away on that element. So then if I refresh, it'll automatically pull that out of the list. And so that's no longer considered a warning. So those are a couple of features that are pretty nice. And then also, for instance, if you wanted just this, if you go to the selection box, if you're not in isolate mode, if you click on that row and then do a selection box, it will give you a selection box just around the elements defined. So if you're in the big model, so turn that off, and if I go back over here and turn the selection box off. So say you have your whole entire model that's like this. If you want just these two walls, selection box, and it'll jump you into just where those two things conflict. And then, of course, even more so, you could go to isolate filter and dive in again. So it's just a way to kind of be able to jump, hop into those things. And then also, you can either use a selection box, or if you actually double click on a row, it will do the same functionality. So it's just kind of a shorter method to get there. If it happens to be an annotation or a view specific item, it will take you to the view. So for instance, if I do this, I pull this tag out of this room, it's going to say it's out of space, right? So if I hit refresh, now I have room tag is out of room. Typically, if you were to do this and try to do a selection box around it, it doesn't do anything because Revit doesn't put selection boxes around 2D or annotations. But integrated to where if you do double click and it is an annotation, it does select it and take you to the plan that it's saying it's out of its room in. So that's just a way to be able to hop a little bit faster to annotation or two-dimensional things as well. So it gives you the functionality of three-dimensional elements as well as two-dimensional elements, and just a way to get there, clean them up, and some additional information, folks that are using them. So just I've found information that to be really useful, and also in terms of the GitHub, it gives you some examples of how to connect some of the data sources, read through elements, create a data table connected to the data grid view, how to select things from a combo box. So some additional features too, just from a learning perspective if you want to get on top of that. And then the next thing was just a request from somebody on GitHub. I think they're looking at it from a little bit of a Dynamo perspective, but I think it was kind of a fun thing, fun challenge, if you will. So it's an all instances by category. So most of you that use Dynamo would be familiar with the fact that when you start off, you almost always pick a category and then all elements of a category. It's kind of generally how a lot of graphs will start, or some small variation of that. So all this will do is basically you pick a category, and then it's going to give you all family instances of that category. So there's not types in this, but there's our actual placed instances, and it gives you element ID, name, the family that it's in, if it is a view specific item or not. And most three-dimensional elements won't, but for instance, if you do detail items, it's going to show you that they're view specific, and then but you don't get a level, where actual three-dimensional things you should get levels associated. Very similar to the warnings dialog. When you select a line, it does highlight or select that element in the model. Honestly, I'm not sure where that door is, but it does pick that up. So it gives you the ability to start diving further into things. And again, just some examples of how to use, on change committed method from the combo box, and plug that information into the data grid view, and then just being able to pick up and kind of see where elements are. So this is really more of a stepping stone, probably some additional features as we move through that we can start to do things with. But those are really the two biggest updates. Again, all the code for that's been published to the GitHub. It's all commented and it's all available for use. If you have any questions, or you can certainly ask them on here. You can submit an issue or a pull request, if you will, on GitHub, and I will try my best to get back to you. Thanks. Have a good one.